Good evening, my friends. It is truly a privilege to stand here with you today. I always say that the most meaningful conversations I have as a physician do not happen in operating rooms or hospital corridors. They happen in rooms like this, where people gather because they want to understand their bodies, protect their independence, and live the later decades of life with strength rather than limitation. Size. My name is Dr. William. I've spent over 40 years studying the human body, treating patients, and researching metabolic health, aging, and joint function. Over those decades, I've had the privilege of caring for thousands of people in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s who taught me something very important. Thoughtful. Aging is not the same as decline. Let me begin with a story. About 12 years ago, a gentleman named Arthur came to see me. Arthur was 78 years old, tall, dignified, the kind of man who still wore a pressed shirt to a doctor's appointment. He walked slowly into my office using a cane, and the first thing he said to me was something I will never forget. He said, "Doctor, I do everything they tell me to do, but I'm still falling apart." Now, whenever a patient says something like that, I lean forward, because usually what that sentence means is this: they've been following advice that sounds reasonable, but nobody has explained the deeper biology. So I asked Arthur what he meant, and he said, "Every morning, I walk 3 miles. Every morning. My doctor told me walking is the best thing for aging joints. But my knees hurt more every month. My hips ache when I wake up. My fingers are stiff. I feel like my body is wearing out faster the harder I try." He looked at me and said something quietly that I hear far too often. Is this just what happens after 75? Now, I want to pause here for a moment because this is important. How many of you in this room have been told some version of that sentence? That's just aging. I see hands going up. Arthur had been told the same thing. He had seen 2 specialists. He had been given anti-inflammatory medication. He had been told to keep walking, keep moving, stay active. And walking is good. Movement is essential. But something was missing. So I asked Arthur a different question, a question that almost no one had asked him before. "Arthur, what do you eat every day?" He blinked, surprised, and he said, "Doctor, what does food have to do with my knees?" Now that question, that moment, is the reason we are here tonight, because what I told Arthur that day changed his life. I told him that after the age of 75, walking alone is not enough to protect your joints. Movement is only half the story. The other half, the half almost no one explains, is that your joints are living tissues. They are biological structures that must be rebuilt every day from nutrients. And if the body does not receive the specific building materials required for cartilage, synovial fluid, collagen, and anti-inflammatory balance, the joints slowly deteriorate no matter how much walking you do. Arthur's diet, like many people his age, was filled with foods that gave him calories, but almost none of the raw materials his joints desperately needed. 3 months later, Arthur walked back into my office without a cane. The pain in his knees had dropped by nearly 70%. His stiffness in the morning was almost gone. And he said something I love hearing. "Doctor, I feel 10 years younger." And the reason is simple. We didn't just treat his joints with movement. We fed them. Tonight, I'm going to explain something that most doctors never fully explain to their patients. We're going to talk about why walking alone cannot protect your joints after 75. We're going to explore what is actually happening inside your cartilage cells, your connective tissues, your synovial fluid, and your inflammatory system as you age. And most importantly, I'm going to show you exactly what foods your body needs in order to rebuild and protect those joints. Because when you understand the biology, something remarkable happens. The fear disappears, and it gets replaced with something much better: control. So lean forward with me for a moment, because the sentence I'm about to say may change the way you think about aging joints forever. Your joints are not wearing out. They are starving. Now let's move into something that most doctors never explain clearly, and that is the actual problem. Imagine for a moment that your joints are like the hinges on a magnificent set of doors. These doors are the doors of movement in your life. They allow you to stand, walk, bend, climb stairs, hug your grandchildren, carry groceries, travel, garden, and live freely. But these hinges are not made of metal. They are made of living tissue. Inside every joint, there is cartilage, which acts like a shock-absorbing cushion. There is synovial fluid, which lubricates the joint so movement is smooth. There are ligaments and tendons made of collagen fibers that hold everything together. Now picture this system as a factory. In a young body, this factory runs beautifully. Cartilage cells called chondrocytes constantly repair microscopic damage. Synovial cells produce thick, slippery fluid that lubricates the joint surfaces. Collagen fibers are continuously rebuilt. It's a maintenance crew working 24 hours a day. But here's what happens after the age of 75. The factory slows down, not because the body suddenly decides to fail, but because three biological shifts occur. First, protein absorption becomes less efficient. Second, collagen production declines dramatically. Third, inflammation rises quietly throughout the body. This combination creates what I call the silent erosion cycle. Let me explain. Every time you walk, your joints experience tiny, microscopic stresses. This is normal. In fact, this stress is healthy because it signals the body to repair and strengthen tissue. But if the body does not have enough collagen, amino acids, vitamin C, omega-3 fats, and specific minerals, the repair crew cannot keep up. So damage accumulates. Cartilage becomes thinner. Synovial fluid becomes watery instead of thick. The joint surfaces start rubbing more directly against each other, and then people say something heartbreaking. My joints are wearing out. But that is not the real story. The real story is that the repair system no longer has the materials it needs. Walking stimulates repair. But food supplies the raw materials. Without the raw materials, stimulation alone is useless. It's like asking construction workers to rebuild a bridge without giving them steel or concrete. They can work all day, but nothing gets built. Now let's go deeper into the science of what is actually happening inside your body. I want you to imagine zooming down into the microscopic world inside your knee joint. Inside the cartilage, live specialized cells called chondrocytes. Think of them as the master builders of cartilage tissue. These cells produce two critical substances, collagen type 2 and proteoglycans. Collagen forms the structural framework of cartilage. It gives it strength and elasticity. Proteoglycans attract water, giving cartilage its shock-absorbing quality. When you are young, these builders are incredibly active. But after 75, something fascinating happens. The signals that tell these cells to rebuild cartilage become weaker. Growth factors decline. Growth factors, anabolic hormones decline, and inflammation molecules called cytokines increase. These cytokines act like demolition signals. They tell cartilage cells to slow down repair and increase breakdown. Now let's walk through the biological timeline of what happens during a single day in an aging joint. In the morning when you wake up, your joints are stiff because synovial fluid has thickened overnight. Movement gradually spreads this fluid across the cartilage surfaces. This is why gentle walking in the morning feels good. But here's the catch. If your body lacks the amino acids glycine and proline, which are essential for collagen repair, the microscopic wear that occurs during walking cannot be rebuilt effectively. Over weeks, this leads to thinning cartilage. Now add another factor, low-grade chronic inflammation. Many people over 75 unknowingly eat foods that increase inflammatory chemicals in the body. Refined sugars, highly processed vegetable oils, ultra-processed packaged foods. These foods raise inflammatory molecules like interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These molecules actively break down cartilage. Let me say that again because it is critical. Certain foods send biochemical signals that tell your body to destroy joint tissue faster. Now here is the moment in this lecture where things become fascinating, because your body also has a repair switch, a powerful biological turning point. When the right nutrients enter the body consistently, something extraordinary happens. The inflammation signals decrease. Cartilage cells become more active. Synovial fluid becomes thicker and more lubricating, and collagen rebuilding accelerates. This is the turning point. I want you to imagine your joint factory coming back to life. The lights turn on, the repair crews return, the conveyor belts begin moving again, and suddenly the body is not just slowing damage, it is rebuilding. Now let's talk about the foods that trigger this transformation, because this is where the real power lies. Collagen-rich foods are the foundation: bone broth, slow-cooked meats with connective tissue, gelatin-rich foods. These contain glycine and proline, the very amino acids cartilage cells use to rebuild joint tissue. Next comes omega-3 fatty acids. Fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel dramatically reduce inflammatory cytokines. Then we have vitamin C. Without vitamin C, the body cannot form stable collagen fibers. Foods like citrus, bell peppers, kiwi, and berries are essential. Then there are sulfur compounds. Garlic, onions, and cruciferous vegetables support connective tissue formation. And finally, minerals like magnesium and zinc, which activate hundreds of repair enzymes. When these nutrients appear together in the diet consistently, something remarkable happens. Joint tissues receive everything they need to repair themselves. Now, before we go further, I want to pause and address some myths that I hear constantly in my clinic. The first myth is this: if your joints hurt after 75, it's just aging. This is not only wrong, it is physiologically backwards. Pain is not a natural requirement of aging. It is usually a signal of inflammation and tissue breakdown. The second myth: exercise alone protects your joints. Exercise stimulates repair, yes, but without nutrients, the repair cannot occur. Movement without nutrition is like turning on a factory without raw materials. The third myth: protein isn't important after 70. In fact, the opposite is true. Older adults need more protein to maintain tissue repair. Every time I hear someone say older adults should eat less protein, I have to pause, because this myth is costing people their mobility. Now let's talk about clinical evidence. In my clinic, I have seen hundreds of patients over 75 dramatically improve joint function when we combine movement with targeted nutrition. There was a remarkable study conducted in Europe that followed older adults who increased collagen intake and anti-inflammatory foods. Within 12 weeks, they showed measurable improvements in cartilage biomarkers. Pain levels dropped, mobility improved, and inflammatory markers decreased. I have witnessed similar outcomes countless times. Patients who believed their joints were permanently damaged suddenly find themselves walking further, climbing stairs again, even returning to hobbies they had abandoned. Now, I want to give you something practical. If you leave here tonight with nothing else, remember this protocol. Start your morning with protein and collagen support. Eggs, Greek yogurt, or bone broth. Include vitamin C-rich foods with meals. Add fatty fish at least 3 times per week. Use olive oil instead of processed vegetable oils. Eat garlic, onions, and leafy greens daily. And most importantly, continue walking, because walking circulates nutrients into the joint. Food provides the building blocks. Movement delivers them. Together, they create healing. Now, I must also speak carefully about who should be cautious. People with kidney disease must monitor protein intake with their physician. Those on blood-thinning medications should discuss high omega-3 intake with their doctor. Individuals with severe inflammatory arthritis may require medical supervision before major dietary changes. And anyone with complex metabolic disease should always work with their healthcare provider. But for the vast majority of older adults, nourishing the joints properly is one of the safest and most powerful interventions available. Now let's come back to Arthur. 6 months after he changed his diet, he took a hiking trip with his granddaughter. He sent me a photograph. Standing on a hilltop, no cane, smiling. That picture still hangs in my office because it reminds me of something profound. Your body was designed to move. It was designed to repair. It was designed to remain functional far longer than modern society expects. But biology requires partnership. When you give your body the raw materials it evolved to use, it responds with resilience. So, I want to leave you with one sentence tonight. Your joints are not simply structures that wear out with time. They are living tissues waiting to be nourished. Feed them well, move them daily, and your body may surprise you with what it can still rebuild. Thank you for being here tonight. And if this message resonated with you, I would love to hear your experiences. Tell me about your joints, your movement, and what changes you are ready to make starting tomorrow. Because the next chapter of your health can begin with the very next meal.